Let's bring in Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace. She sits on the House Oversight and Armed Services Committees and is now running for governor of South Carolina. How do you see the Minneapolis protests, Congresswoman?
Well, it's all very extreme. And you think about, they're attacking law and order and saying that ICE is extreme. There's nothing extreme about law and order. What you're seeing is the extremities in lawlessness in the streets of Minnesota. And I blame Governor Walz. He is the top leader in the state of Minnesota, leading the state into chaos. And I hope that President Trump will use whatever means necessary to bring calm, to bring law and order to the state of Minnesota and protect the people that live there.
The mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, says that this is, pardon me, this is sort of about love. I'll let him say it. Listen to this.
This is not just about resistance here in Minneapolis. It's about love. We are showing something far more powerful and consequential here, which is love. We are standing up for one another. You've got neighbors helping neighbors. You've got people uniting and coming together in this beautiful way. And obviously, we've got these threats out there from the federal government that were literally designed to intimidate Minneapolis residents, to intimidate me.
He's talking about neighbors helping neighbors, but I want to put up a screenshot of some of the people that ICE has arrested so far in Minneapolis. People convicted of armed robbery, criminal convictions there, 12 criminal convictions on Meng Kong Yang, Joshua Forno, who was convicted of third-degree criminal sexual assault, and the list goes on. Those are some of the people that ICE has arrested, but you wouldn't know that from hearing the mayor talk. Your thoughts?
Well, I didn't know that love meant hugging on rapists, murderers, and pedophiles. If that's his definition of love, I don't want any part of it. And I didn't know that love meant throwing bottles at federal agents. Yeah. It's wild the way that the left is trying to describe this narrative, rewrite history, when we all can see it in black and white on TV, the violence that is unfolding, the defense and the excuses for hitting an ICE agent with a vehicle. It's really outrageous. And it's perplexing that this is even happening in the United States of America.
If none of this were happening, I suppose the top headline in Minnesota would be the $9 billion plus in fraud committed by a number of Somali immigrants and others, fleecing the state and federal government out of all kinds of money. Tim Walz typically would be held accountable for that, but he doesn't have to worry about that right now because of all these protests going on, or at least it's burying that story in the papers.
Well, I don't think anything's going to stop Secretary Scott Bessent. He has stated that the Treasury is going to go after the fraud in Minnesota, and I believe in Secretary Bessent being able to do that. And I hope that he investigates Tim Walz and Keith Ellison to the fullest extent of the law. And if that means a cold, dark cell to pay for potential crimes and cover up that may have been committed, then so be it. We need to come back to an era of law and order in this country where people who break the law are held accountable. I am tired of judges and magistrates and prosecutors not prosecuting, not throwing people in jail. I don't care the crime. We need to bring lawlessness. We need to take it off the streets and bring law and order back to America. That
may be, but Quinnipiac took a poll and asked Americans how they feel about the way ICE is handling the immigration laws in this country. And 40% say they approve, while 57% say they disapprove. What do you attribute those numbers to, Congresswoman?
Certainly, I attribute much of that to the lies that are being told in the mainstream media, the truth that's being hidden from the American people. I can tell you, running for governor here in South Carolina, that's not the way people feel. We respect ICE, we support ICE, and we absolutely support the deportation of criminal illegal aliens here in South Carolina.
Your committee in Congress is going to be holding a roundtable this week, bipartisan. That's kind of a rare thing in Washington these days, on internet crimes against children. What are you hoping to accomplish?
Well, I'm hoping to accomplish is showing the American people that partisanship stops at the door when we're talking about protecting children. We've seen a number of pieces of legislation that have come to the floor, that have been drafted, that I filed or others have filed to protect children. And in the advent of AI, deep fakes, the way that technology is advancing so quickly, the way that social media and algorithms influence our children and even predators, we want to make sure that we are working together hand in hand, Republican and Democrat alike, to protect America's children. In fact, just last week on Thursday, I had a press conference with more than a dozen moms who were angered about the release of a pedophile onto the streets of South Carolina, hours after being arrested for violating his bond. And wouldn't you know, the local mainstream media had a media blackout and refused to cover the story, even though they were there to cover the story. And so I'm going to be working overtime with people on both sides of the aisle that want to expose this kind of behavior in South Carolina and beyond. We're going to do it together.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that a lot of the media have taken sides in political issues these days. Congresswoman Nancy Mace of South Carolina, thanks.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.